All right, so we've started. We are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this another beautiful session with our speaker, Violetta Zane. We are continuing in a series of discussions that she has promised to bring us as members of the Clearwater community, and all of you who wish to join us as guests. We are very you are all welcome. We're very happy to have you here. And more importantly, those of you joining us on YouTube and Zoom, YouTube and Facebook after the fact, we're also very happy to have you joining us as we are learning here together today on October 9th, a Sunday at 11 a.m. You're welcome to join on Zoom at these sessions at 11 a.m. If you visit clearwaterbaha'is.org, you will find the Zoom links and the attendance information, and we look forward to you registering and joining. With that being said, this week's topic, you can see it on the screen, how Baha'u'lláh recreated the Bábí community of Baghdad. This is in Iraq. And in this talk, Violetta will be discussing the massively important place Iraq occupies in the Bábí and the Baha'i faith. And we'll be concentrating on the 7 years between Baha'u'llah's return from his self-imposed retirement in Kurdistan and the declaration of his mission in the Garden of Ridwan in the eve of his departure towards his second exile. So just a point of note for everybody, Ridwan is the Arabic and Rizwan is the pronunciation of the Arabic and Persian, both of which are equally valid and usable. So Rizwan and Ridwan are both okay. Just putting it out there. Next, the information about our speaker. It's important to mention this again for those of you who have not heard. We need to say this. Violetta's family has pioneered in Africa for 2 generations. Her first grandparents to Spanish Morocco during the 10-year crusade, and her parents following suit by pioneering in Central Africa since 1981. After her undergraduate degree in international relations, Violetta served and then traveled throughout Africa before serving at the Baha'i World Center for 2.5 years. She then served at the Office for Public Information for the Baha'i International Community in Paris before living in Los Angeles for a few years, some of which were spent as localization producer for video games at Disney, which is amazing, by the way. In 2013, Violetta returned to, now this is the Violetta correction, please, Pointe Noire.
Pointe Noire, that's very close. Good job.
Thank you. Pointe Noire,
yep,
Congo, where she currently lives. She is involved in graphic design work for software, education, and public health projects. She also makes educational videos for the school her parents own. In her services to the faith, she has been assisting the Continental Board of Counselors with special projects relating to capacity building of administrators, statistics visualization and analysis, public health infographics, and booklet and brochure design for various projects. So I know this was a little introduction, Violetta, and I appreciate being able to say this each time because I feel that everyone, because of how sparse we have spread out the presentations, some people don't know you yet. So I'm very happy you were able to do the introduction. And
I'll send you a shorter version for next month. I think that one was a little bit long.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, that the work you're presenting us is also kind of linked with what you do for a living as well. And that's important for people to know, I think. Yeah. You're good at what you do is what it means.
Well, welcome, everyone. Should I take it from here? Are we ready?
Please do. Please do. We are ready.
So,
Jeremiah, everything good?
For those of you who don't know, I have spent the last 3 years writing illustrated chronologies of the central figures of the faith. I started with an illustrated chronology of the life of Abdul-Baha, which is available on the website, which I can't send you right now because it would include too much window changing. But anyway, after I finished this tribute to Abdul-Baha on the centenary of his passing, I thought, oh, 2002 is 130 years after the passing of Baha'u'lláh. What if I did an illustrated chronology on the Blessed Beauty? And so I started on that, and I was able to publish it on the 130th anniversary of his passing. And one of the most amazing things I discovered while doing this chronology of Baha'u'lláh, I mean, if I said all the different things I discovered, that would be another talk that I haven't prepared. But one of the most amazing things that I discovered was the place Iraq occupies in the history of our faith, and how amazing Baha'u'llah's life was after he returned from Kurdistan, those 7 years before his declaration in the Garden of Rizwan. And the second reason why I have such a strong attachment to this period in Baha'u'llah's life is not just because it's my favorite in his life, it's also because of two Iraqi Baha'is, Abir Majid and Saad Salim. Abir Majid is here, I don't know if Saad is, but we were in constant communication when I was writing. And that sort of intimacy and fellowship, exchanging the content of our emails, was only the Most Great House, Baghdad, Iraq, the trip of Baha'u'lláh, that level of spiritual connection with these two wonderful souls, a friendship that has continued after the chronology, is another thing that makes Iraq and this talk so special for me. So I'm going to start out by just giving you, I have another separate talk on the importance of Iraq for the Baha'i faith. This talk especially focuses on the reconstruction of the Babi community. So it's quite historical, and it only focuses on 7 years, but I do have to spend 15 minutes explaining why Baha'u'lláh had to reconstruct that community in the first place. But before we do that, Iraq has occupied 50 years of spiritual preparation for the advent of the Bab and Baha'u'lláh. When Sheikh Ahmad, who was born in Saudi Arabia, moved to the center of learning of Shia Islam in order to prepare for the coming of the Promised One. He just knew the Promised One was coming, and he knew Shia Islam was broken. And then he traveled to Persia, and he was in Persia when both the Bab and Baha'u'lláh were born, and he knew it. And he met Sayyid Kazim while he was during that trip in Persia, and then gave Sayyid Kazim his study and said, I'm going. And Sayyid Kazim continued his work until his death in 1843. Now, in 1835, Mullah Hussein moved to Karbala, Iraq, to be with Sayyid Kazim and become his student. The Bab was in Karbala, Iraq in 1841 and met Sayyid Kazim, a life-changing experience for him. The Bab was even present at one of Sayyid Kazim's lectures, and a ray of sunlight fell on his lap, and Sayyid Kazim said, the Promised One is in front of you, and the sun even indicates him to you. And his students were so blind, they didn't see him. Sayyid Kazim died in 1843. 10 days after his death, Tahireh, who had become a sheikhi because she found a book in her cousin's library, arrived in Karbala and took over his study and all his unpublished manuscripts with the blessing of his widow. Then Baha'u'lláh arrived in Iraq in 1851, 2 years before he returns for his first exile. Iraq is also special because it's where the first glimmers of the majesty of Baha'u'lláh were perceived by the Iraqi Kurds. The Iraqi Kurds are the first people in history to have recognized the majesty of Baha'u'lláh, and you'll see why. It's also the place of the first emanations of his pen, both in Kurdistan and in Baghdad, and some in Kazimine and some in Karbala. It's also where the first real Babi community was established. And last and most important, it is the place of Baha'u'llah's declaration on an island called the island of Najibiyeh. Now, when Baha'u'lláh arrived in Baghdad, he arrived 6 years after Tahir's departure, 3 years after the martyrdom of the Bab, and 1 year after his 8-month stay in Karbala, before he was in Shia Shah. And in that time, the Iraqi Babis were so isolated from information and from other Babis and from other Babi communities and from the letters of the living and from all of those things, that Baha'u'lláh said something incredible. He said, upon our arrival in Iraq, we found the cause of God sunk in deep apathy and the breeze of divine revelation stilled. Most of the believers were faint and dispirited, nay, utterly lost and dead. Baha'u'llah's natural leadership was instant. Now, for the first year that Baha'u'lláh spent in Iraq, from the 8th of April 1853, the day he arrives, to the 10th of April 1854, the day he leaves for Kurdistan, the few and confused leaderless Babis that were left in Baghdad flocked to Baha'u'lláh for advice, guidance, and protection. This image shows the neighborhood that Baha'u'lláh lived in before he went to live in the Most Great House. A general view. Baha'u'llah's majesty became also very obvious in that one year. Now, Baha'u'lláh had received the revelation in the Siyat Shal, and he had already revealed the Rashiyama, the clouds from the realms above, that extraordinary mystical poem about his revelation. And so, because he had received the revelation in the Siyat Shal, he was getting revelation from God. And it became almost impossible for him to hide it. When he was in Karbala, he unveiled his station to some believers. And when he was in Kazimain, he spoke to them a language of heaven, a language called the Badi language. It's a spiritual language, a spiritual realms. Another thing that became obvious was Baha'u'llah's supremacy. So there was a Persian Baha'i who came and asked Mirza Yahya, who was the nominee of the Bab, to give him a commentary on a verse of the Quran about all food. It's something about the Jewish people and all food. It's very complex. Mirza Yahya did a terrible job. And so this believer brought it to Baha'u'lláh, who revealed an astounding tablet called the Lahi Kulut Tam, tablet of all food. And this tablet was widely disseminated in Iraq and Iran, and it started firing up the jealousy of Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad, which was further set on fire by the fact that the circle of Baha'u'llah's admirers in this brief period of 12 months, during which his baby, Ali Muhammad, was born, it grew to include Ottoman officials, the governor of Baghdad, many of Sayyid Kazim's former companions, Persian royalty that was exiled. So this jealousy of Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad began to manifest itself because they preyed on the confusion of the Babis. So Mirza Yahya started claiming he was the successor of the Bab, not the nominee. They started sowing seeds of doubts in the hearts of the Babis about Baha'u'lláh, and they started clandestine opposition. But they also moved to attacks. They actually had an open campaign against Baha'u'lláh. They planned to injure him. All of this just caused absolutely immense, unbearable sorrow in Baha'u'llah's heart. Baha'u'lláh made every effort to repair the relationship. And he described this period as tribulation upon tribulation, woes at their blackest. He describes his powerlessness, poverty, and destitution. This is a manifestation of God speaking about his poverty, powerlessness, and destitution. He was in a constant state of sorrow. He was saying, the tablet, the remover of difficulties, 500 to 1,000 times a day. One night, he just ran out of the house and he was in such a state of sorrow. He was almost in a state of confusion. This was a few days before he left. And one of the things I really feel Baha'is need to understand, one of the things I want you to leave this presentation with, is how close we came to not having Baha'u'lláh. Because in God Passes By, Shoghi Effendi quotes Baha'u'lláh as saying, our withdrawal contemplated no return, and our separation hoped for no reunion. He left without planning to come back. That is something that needs to be very clear in our hearts. So by the time he arrived in Iraqi Kurdistan, in the area of Suleimanieh, which is the largest town, he went to a mountain called Sargalu, which is about 3-day walk from Suleimanieh and very, very isolated. And he was known as Darvish Muhammad-i Irani, Darvish Muhammad, the Persian. And Baha'u'lláh describes this time of solitude. It was a very harsh winters. He lived for 1 calendar year, approximately, in these caves. And he took refuge in caves and in abandoned shelters that Iraqi shepherds had left behind. This is Kurdish region, so everyone was Kurd in this region. But Baha'u'lláh describes this time as of solitude and contemplation. Alone I commune with my spirit, oblivious of the world and all that is therein. The birds of the air were my companions, and the beasts of the field my associates. In my exile, every eye wept sore over me, and all created things shed tears of blood because of mine anguish. Now, the left picture is the mountain of Sargalu. The middle picture is Baha'u'llah's actual kashkul, or alms bowl, from that period. And on the right is a calligraphy exercise from the Bab, as a transition to the next slide, because this is something, it's like a calligraphy exercise that Bob did when he was a child. And one day, so even in the middle of Kurdistan, in a remote mountain, Baha'u'lláh was unable to contain his greatness. He came across a young child crying one day because he did not have a calligraphy exercise. His teacher hadn't given it to him. And so Baha'u'lláh said, I will give you one. So he gave him a sample of his writing for him to practice. The little kid ran back to Suleimanieh, showed everybody this, said there's this amazing dervish on this mountain. And one of the leaders of one of the Kurdish, I don't know if they were schools or the Sufi schools, one of the Sufi schools, had a dream that Muhammad told him to go and take care of this dervish on this mountain. And that is the second year of Baha'u'llah's stay in Kurdistan, but this time in Suleimanieh. On the top, you have the Taqi, the Sufi seminary, where Baha'u'lláh stayed. On the bottom, you have an old 17th century engraving of Sufi theological discourses. Because one of the things they did is they realized that Baha'u'lláh was very quiet, very silent, but he answered any question you asked. Which is something to remember about our faith, is we are a faith of questions. A majority of the writings of the Baha'u'lláh were answers to questions, and most importantly, the Kitab-i-Iqan, which I will speak about later. But so these discourses where Baha'u'lláh would open new worlds to the Kurds of Iraq. This is kind of a contemporary picture of several different kinds of Kurds on the left there that I got from the Library of Congress, maybe 10, 15, 20 years after Baha'u'lláh was there. So but sort of contemporary picture, actually, quite amazing. So they asked Baha'u'lláh about the Meccan Revelations, a 37-volume Sufi book, which Baha'u'lláh had never read, but he had them read it to him, and he would comment on it and open new spiritual worlds for them. The thing he did that's the most amazing in Suleimanieh was that he was asked to reveal a poem in the same meter and rhyme as the greatest achievement in Arabic mystical literature, 12th century Ibn Farid's Qadsiye-i Tayyeh. So Baha'u'lláh exceeded their request. He revealed it not only in the same meter and rhyme, but 3 times the length, and its subject was much more exalted than Ibn Farid's subject. But Baha'u'lláh only allowed the Kurds to keep 127 verses of his revelation, saying he esteemed that the subject matter was too premature. During his time in Suleimanieh, Bahá'u'lláh helped the Kurds. He helped them secure endowments for their mosque. He helped them with custodianship, securing custodianship for the mosque. And he drew up legal documents for the inhabitants. But while he was in Kurdistan, things were going worse in Baghdad. Mirza Yahya moved in with the Holy Family. Baha'u'llah's baby, Ali Muhammad, died. And Mirza Yahya was so paranoid, he didn't allow the baby's body to be prepared or washed. He didn't allow it to be buried. It had to be given to a stranger, and no one ever found out where he was buried. He made a plan to assassinate the Shah of Persia and sent Baha'u'llah's amanuensis, why am I forgetting his name? What's his name again? Mirza Agha Jan. Mirza Agha Jan. He sent him to Persia to kill his Shah. But that's not the worst thing he did. The worst thing Mirza Yahya did is he married the widow of the Bab. Not his first wife, Fatimeh Begum, his second wife. He married her, and 1 month later gave her in marriage to Sayyid Muhammad, desecrating the Bab's name in a way that would have long-range consequences and would thoroughly break the heart of Baha'u'lláh. In Baha'u'llah's 2-year absence, 25 Babis claimed to be the promised one, and their behavior became so terrible. The thugs, like Sayyid Muhammad had thugs. I mean, literal, I'm not talking about people who look like thugs. I'm saying they were actual thugs. He had a private gang, and they would snatch turbans off of wealthy pilgrims, steal shoes, steal divans and candles from shrines. They robbed cups from fountains. Babis could not show their face in public. They were hated by everyone. They stayed in their houses. They were scared to go and buy food. They were reviled. They were spat on. They were insulted. And so Baha'u'llah's family sent very, very wisely a man named Sheikh Sultan, an Iraqi believer. Very smart. They didn't send a Persian. They sent an Iraqi believer to Kurdistan to beg him to come. And he had letters from the believers, letters from his family, and guess what? He had a letter from Mirza Yahya asking him to please return to Baghdad. Baha'u'lláh at first refused, but then accepted to end his seclusion. And he explains why. Because from the mystic source, there came the summons, bidding us to return whence we came. Surrendering our will to his, we submitted to his injunction. Do you see that even the manifestation is of God? He didn't want to go, but he surrendered his will to the mystic source, which is basically God. And one of the saddest things I think I've ever read in my life is him walking back to Baghdad with Sheikh Sultan, who wrote his memoirs of this entire experience, and I haven't been able to find them, so if anyone knows where they are. He tells Sheikh Sultan that these are the last days of his retirement. The only days of peace and tranquility left to him, days which will never again fall to my lot. This means two things. One, it means that he loved his time in Kurdistan, and they were times of peace and tranquility. And two, it means he knew what was coming, and he still returned. So he returned, Baha'u'lláh returned on the 19th of March, 1956. And between 1956 and 1958, there were some lovely things that happened. He is reunited with his family in a very touching way. I mean, Asiye Khanum sewed a beautiful red coat with the very last of her wedding treasures for her husband. There's a reunion with the believers, some of whom are pictured to the left. There's a reunion with Mirza Mihdi, who is now 10 years old, who was left in Persia when they made the trip in 1853. So he returns in 1858. So yeah, it was a long separation with his child. And the wedding of Mirza Musa, who married the daughter of the Iraqi believer Sheikh Sultan, who came to get Bahá'u'lláh in Suleimanieh. So that's a lovely connection between the families. It's a bittersweet reunion because by the time that Baha'u'lláh returns, the community is completely broken. And I explained why in the slides previously. But when he returns is also when Dayan, a Babi that had an amazing station. We don't hear enough about Dayan. Dayan was called by the Bab and by Baha'u'lláh extraordinary titles. He was called the point of the Bayan. He was called the repository of the knowledge of God. He was called the third letter to believe in him whom God shall make manifest, and the repository of the trust of the one true God. Mirza Yahya had him assassinated. And again, Baha'u'lláh, quoted by Shoghi Effendi, says that when he returned from Kurdistan, we found no more than a handful of souls, faint and dispirited, nay, utterly lost and dead. The cause of God had ceased to be on anyone's lips, nor was any heart receptive to its message. That is how broken the community was. Nobody is speaking the name of the faith. No heart is ready to hear the message of Baha'u'lláh and the Bab. And that is what Baha'u'lláh has to fix. So now we're going to talk about spiritual transformation. I'm getting finally to my point, but I had to explain why it needed spiritual transformation. This quote is from the Kitab-i-Iqan, revealed 5 years after Baha'u'lláh arrives from Kurdistan. And it is extraordinary. It is an answer to 4 questions that a maternal uncle of the Bab asked Baha'u'lláh and was revealed in 48 hours. And I am going to center my talk on this quote. I'm going to answer all of your questions based on this quote. Is it not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind? A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. And I'm going to show you what I do with quotes I like and I want to understand better. Here we have an arrow. Is it not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and its external conditions. So that's what we're going to look at now. How Baha'u'llah's inward and outward transformation of the Babi community of Baghdad between the 19th of March 1856 and the 21st of April 1863, his transformation of the Babi's community's inner life and his external conditions, had several components that we're going to look at in detail. Baha'u'llah's revelation, Baha'u'llah's presence, his words and his deeds, Baha'u'llah's guidance. The most great house is a very important aspect of this. So we're going to look at these in detail now. Before we do, though, I have to tell you that this was not a great period with no opposition. There was major opposition, but I don't want to talk about that because I want to focus on the transformation. But I do have a historical duty to explain to you what happened to Baha'u'lláh in terms of opposition. Two non-Babis, Sheikh Abdul Hussein, a cunning and troublemaking, disgraced Persian priest, and Mirza Buzurg Karni Nuri, the new Persian consul who arrived in 1860. Those two allied themselves, and between 1860 and 1861, they assaulted Baha'u'lláh with 9 months of continual opposition. They they disseminated fake dreams about blood smeared on people and the verses of the Quran. They hired a Turkish assassin who tried to kill Baha'u'lláh twice and failed. They tried to call this conclave to declare holy war. There were attack mobs in the street. And then towards the end of Baha'u'llah's stay, Mirza Buzur continued his campaign from Persia and sent all these letters to Constantinople securing Baha'u'llah's second banishment. So just real quick, this was not a peaceful time, but we're just going to talk about something positive, which is complete spiritual transformation. And the main point is that the transformation of the Babi community in Baghdad had everything to do with Baha'u'llah's revelation. And this is a quote from Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By. The complete transformation which the written and spoken word of Baha'u'lláh had effected in the outlook and character of his companions was equaled by the burning devotion which his love had kindled in their souls. So we have three elements of transformation here. We have the written word of Baha'u'lláh, the spoken word of Baha'u'lláh, and his love. This is one of three eras in Baha'u'llah's life where maybe there are more, but I saw three when I was writing the chronology. The first time that the verses of God came down with such astounding speed that they could not be written down was in Iraq, after Baha'u'llah's return from Kurdistan. After our arrival, we revealed as a copious rain by the aid of God and his divine grace and mercy our verses, and sent them to various parts of the world. That's the bank of the Tigris, where, not exactly there, but Baha'u'lláh walked along the banks of the Tigris when he revealed one whole section of the hidden words. The other two times when the revelation was this astounding is in 1867, after the most great separation with Mirza Yahya finally happens. And you see all of the letters to the kings. Those are parts of that copious rain. And then the last time that I noticed it was starting in 1877 until Baha'u'llah's death. He revealed constantly. Now, transformed individuals were also part of the transformation of the Babi community. These people entered Baha'u'llah's presence and changed. Nabili Akbar was one of the most learned men of Persia, similar to Vahid in the Bab's time, who had memorized 30,000 verses of the Quran and of the Hadiths, 30,000 Islamic traditions. But when he came face to face with the Bab, he said, "I am dust beneath his feet." Nabili Akbar was one of the most learned men of Persia, and at first he was arrogant towards Baha'u'lláh. But then he heard Baha'u'lláh speak, and he was so transformed. Not only was he transformed, he realized he was the one whose advent the Bab had promised, and wrote him several letters. Salman was also transformed. This man was, it was very interesting. He was almost illiterate, but he was the courier of Baha'u'lláh for 4 decades. He walked thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers back and forth. This man was recreated by Baha'u'lláh. He never once in 40 years lost a tablet, never once gave a tablet to the wrong person, and he himself was the recipient of some of Baha'u'llah's most complex and mystical tablets. Nabil Yazam, on the right here, he was the eminent Baha'i historian who wrote the Dawnbreakers, and from the moment that he became a Babi, he started writing down people's accounts. For 40 years he did that, until finally everybody asked him, "Please ask Baha'u'lláh if you can write a book." And then Baha'u'lláh gave him the permission to write the Dawnbreakers. He is the man who compiled the Tablet of Visitation for Baha'u'lláh. And he is the man who could not live in a world where Baha'u'lláh was no longer alive, and threw himself into the sea. So these are just 3 among the many people who were completely recreated by Baha'u'lláh. What the Babis in Baghdad, few of them realized, is that Baha'u'lláh was transforming Babi beliefs into Baha'i beliefs. He brought integrity to a whole new level. So he was explaining to a man who had not punished a Babi because he was a Babi and he respected Bahá'u'lláh. He said, you should have punished him. He said, I would be pleased and appreciate your action were you to bind Mirza Musa's hands and cast him into the river to drown and refuse to consider the intercession of anyone on his behalf. That's the integrity that he was trying to get people. It's like the community was so broken. Baha'u'lláh recreated it with beliefs that were so beyond reproach. He also said, it would be more acceptable in my sight for a person to harm one of my own sons or relatives rather than inflict injury upon any soul. So between 1856 and 1863, through his words and his deeds and his love and his example, Baha'u'lláh is slowly changing Babi beliefs into Baha'i beliefs and preparing people for his declaration. Now, Abir, I think this is Saad's picture, no? Anyway, I think this is Saad, my friend Saad Salim. I was telling you my friends Abir Majid and Saad Salim helped me out. I think Saad took this picture. This is a picture I had never seen before in my life. It's a color picture of the door of the most great house of Baha'u'lláh in Baghdad. Baha'u'lláh lived for 7 years in one house. In Adrianople, Baha'u'lláh lived in 7 houses. In Constantinople, he lived in 2 houses over a period of 4 months. And in Akka, he lived in 8 houses. But in Baghdad, he lived in 1 house for 7 years. And that house was the focal point of the Babi community. Everybody knew to come there if they wanted to see Baha'u'lláh. Lectures took place in the reception room. And there were eminent visitors, members of like the Princess, what's her name? Shamsi Jahan, the daughter of Fatih Ali Shah. Many writings were revealed in the Most Great House. There was always tea. And even rich Iraqis would come and say, I want to build the same reception room. And Baha'u'lláh said, but would it have the same spirit? So this is a photograph showing the banister right here. The banister here in front of the Baha'u'llah's room. You see the 9 windows of Baha'u'llah's room? I think this is the Biruni, really, the reception room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And in the plan here, you can see these same 9 here. This yellow dot is from where the picture was taken. So facing the inner courtyard, the balcony in front of the... So this, there's no understating the importance of the Most Great House. Now, one of my absolute favorite things about Baghdad is that Baha'u'lláh went to the coffee houses of Baghdad, like an Iraqi. He went twice a day for an hour and a half each time, and he taught the faith the entire time. Anybody who wanted to see Baha'u'lláh knew where to find him. He had special coffee shops that he liked. Some he liked more than others, and he had his habits. He would always call over the owner to have tea with him. In fact, after his departure in 1863, some of the coffee shop owners of Baghdad were so heartbroken that he had gone. One of them closed their coffee shop for good, and the other one refused to ever set foot in it again. And this is something that Baha'u'lláh says when he's in Bahji. I think he was in the Rizwan garden when he said this. He said, during the days of Baghdad, we ourselves used to visit the coffee house and meet with everyone. This is very important because it never happens again. This is the one and only time in Baha'u'llah's life where he mingled with people, and it was Iraqi people that he mingled with. He never, ever again went to coffee houses, never left his house again, never engaged with strangers again. This is only in Baghdad. Another thing that never happens again is his interaction with the people of Baghdad. There was an 80-year-old woman who used to know Baha'u'llah's route in the morning, and she used to stop on the side of the street every day. She lived in a ruined house, and she would just stop. And Baha'u'llah would stop to see her when he saw her, and she would kiss his hands, and then she would get on her tippy toes and try to kiss his face. But he was too tall for her because she must have been very, very small. So he would bring his face down so that she could kiss his face. And about this woman, Baha'u'lláh said, she knows that I like her. That is why she likes me. But it's not just that. He didn't just like her, he loved her. Because when he left Baghdad, Baha'u'lláh ensured that that woman would be looked after and that she would receive a daily allowance until the day she died. This kind of interaction with the people of a city never happens again in Baha'u'llah's life. This is specific to Baghdad. Now, this is possibly in a I don't know. Other than the declaration of Baha'u'lláh, the most spiritually significant thing that happens is that Baha'u'lláh managed to convince the mother of the Bab of the station of her son, and she became a believer. Baha'u'lláh said, "Praise be to God that the mother of the blessed being came to believe at the end." This was always something that had been difficult for the Bab, and she didn't believe until the very end of her life. And the fact that Mirza Yahya and Sayyid Muhammad had dishonored the Bab by both marrying his second wife was an immense obstacle. Baha'u'lláh sent two very deepened Babis from Shiraz who knew her from Shiraz, from before she left Shiraz, because after the death of her son, of the Bab, she moved to Iraq to finish her life there because she couldn't live in Iran anymore. But anyway, it was entirely through the efforts of Baha'u'lláh that she became a believer. He chose the right people, a man and a woman, just the right people. And they were patient. This is possibly my favorite story about Iraq. Baha'u'lláh had a bakery. The bakery was across the street from the most great house. The father of the two bakers was this 90-year-old man who loved to tell funny stories. And the bakers baked enough bread for all of the Babi community, free of charge. This is such a symbolic thing for Baha'u'lláh to own a bakery. I mean, bread is such an essential element of life. The fact that everyone was sharing the same bread and that they were getting free bread, I mean, it's just amazing. He bought the flour mill and he just got this bakery going. It's a forerunner of Baha'i social action. I mean, imagine in your Baha'i community if you had a bakery. You know what I mean? It's such a joyful thing, a bakery. Baha'u'lláh would always stop by on his way back from his farm that his brother Mirza Musa rented for him, the Mazra-e Vashash, where the tablet of the Holy Mariner was revealed. He would always stop by the bakery and see how the bakers were going and how everything was. Now, the prestige of Baha'u'lláh and the Babi faith grew so much. Rich Persians made Baha'u'lláh the executor of their wills. This made all his enemies so jealous. The governor himself, Namik Pasha, that's his picture in the middle, was so impressed by the many signs of esteem and veneration in which Baha'u'lláh was held, he called upon him to pay his personal tribute. And Namik Pasha was faithful to Baha'u'lláh until the end, and even asked Baha'u'lláh for a favor when he was exiled. He said, "Can you bring a horse to my son in Constantinople?" Which Baha'u'lláh did, and he appointed one special guy to take care of that horse. So we're arriving at the completed transformation of the community. But transformation also contains an element of time. And from the writings of the Bab wrote, "Do thou grant a respite of 19 years as a token of thy favor, so that those who have embraced this cause may be graciously rewarded by thee." And as these 19 years were coming to an end with the declaration of Baha'u'lláh in the Garden of Rizwan, the onrushing spiritual forces that were falling on Baha'u'lláh made him change. His appearance changed. I mean, he was starting to receive this revelation. He was about to declare, you know? So obviously he changed. He started wearing a taj, a very tall headdress. This is an example of one of Baha'u'llah's tajas from the archives. And let's see. His soul was filled with exaltation. His demeanor changed. And this taj is something he adopted on the day he left the most great house. So we're going to see that a little bit later. Now, I want to talk about Baha'u'llah's Messianic writings of ecstasy. Messianic is a word meaning relating to the Messiah, relating to the Promised One. For the 6 months, so November 1862 to April 1863. For the 6 months leading up to Baha'u'llah's declaration in the Garden of Rizwan, Baha'u'llah revealed festive, soul-entrancing poems and tablets of ecstasy nearly every day. They were filled with allusions to the unveiling of Baha'u'llah's station. Most of them featured the Maid of Heaven, the personification of the Most Great Spirit, that very same Maid of Heaven that came to Baha'u'llah in the Siyachal to give him the revelation. They speak of God's revelation to Baha'u'llah in the Siyachal. They bid Baha'u'llah to lift up his voice between earth and heaven. They're glad tidings of the advent of the day of God, and they are announcing his approaching declaration. So this is happening for 6 months before April 1863, and the ecstasy is just growing. I mean, every time he reveals one of these, the Babis gather together and study it all night long. You know, they study it, they chant it, they try to find out what the allusions are. What is he talking about? What kind of revelation could it be? But they're like, but the advent of the day of God is coming. And so here are 7 of these transformative messianic writings of ecstasy. And 3 of them have been translated by the House of Justice's research department. The Tablet of the Immortal. And I'm just going to need a Persian speaker here to unmute themselves and do this reading for me, please. I would like somebody to read these names in a beautiful, with the correct accent. I don't want to do it. So can anybody unmute themselves?
Well, I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to start from the beginning?
I would like you to just read the Persian and the English of each of the 7 poems, and then we'll go on to the next slide.
Subhana Rabbiyul-A'la. Praise be our Lord Most High. Lohe Qulamul Khuld, Tablet of the Immortal Youth. Huriyat Ojab, Tablet of the Wondrous Maiden. Lohe Asher va Ma'shuq, Tablet of the Lover and the Beloved. Lohe Huriyeh, Tablet of the Divine Maiden. Lohe Haliya Bisharat, Hallelujah, O glad tidings. As Baqe Elahi, from the divine garden.
Thank you so much, Sudave. Yeah, I refuse to read those because they're so beautiful. They're such beautiful poems. I don't want to butcher the names. So please go and read those in days of remembrance. They're very, very beautiful. The Tablet of the Immortal Youth, Tablet of the Wondrous Maiden, and Tablet of the Lover and the Beloved. So this is one, I believe, from the Tablet of the Immortal Youth. This is the immortal youth, come with a mighty cause. This is the immortal youth, come with a transcendent cause. I mean, can you imagine what effect this was having on people? I mean, they forgot to sleep and eat. They were so enraptured. They forgot to eat and sleep. And when the tablet, was it the tablet? One of these tablets was revealed in one night, and they just read it all through the night and chanted it. And in the middle of the night, the believers, this was like just a few days before the declaration, the believers were filled with such a spiritual commotion, so much joy, so much ecstasy. There was so much power radiating from that room. And Abdul Baha, a youth of 19, was there. And they were chanting these soul-stirring tablets that Baha'u'llah walked in and said that he had been attracted by their spirit. And he anointed each of these enraptured Babis with attar of roses and then left. And that was couple of nights before the declaration. So you can just imagine what the declaration must have been like. So this is the day that Baha'u'lláh leaves the most great house. This is a boat that he took. It's called a kufa. It's an traditional Iraqi boat made of reed. It's round and it's used on the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. This is a boat that Baha'u'lláh took to cross the river to the garden. Now the rest of these pictures are the garden of Najibiyeh, baptized by the Baha'is, the Rizwan garden. The picture on the bottom right here is seen from the banks of the river. See, so when you get out of the boat, you would walk up, or anyway, they became the gardens of the Royal Hospital after a while. So anyway, so that's the first day that Baha'u'lláh leaves, but I forgot to tell you something important. When Baha'u'lláh walked away from his house and went to the river, the whole population of Baghdad was behind him and walking with him because they knew he was leaving. Before he got into the Kufa, he told them, "O my companions, I entrust to your keeping this city of Baghdad, in the state ye now behold it, when from the eyes of friends and strangers alike, crowding its housetops, its streets and markets, tears like the rain of spring are flowing down, and I depart. With you it now rests to watch, lest your deeds and conducts dim the flame of love that gloweth within the breasts of its inhabitants." Do you see the transformation? They used to spit at the Babis in 1856, and now they're crying and standing on the rooftops because Baha'u'lláh is leaving. That's spiritual transformation. So we don't know what happened during the revelation. That is actually one of the corners of Baha'i history we know the least about. The only information we have is a tablet that Baha'u'lláh revealed 5 years later, that is in Days of Remembrance, and it's a tablet about sort of the spiritual forces that were unleashed on the day of the declaration. But we don't exactly know how he made the announcement to his friends, but we do know that he declared his mission, and he revealed a lengthy tablet called the Suri Sabr, which is a quarter of the length of the Iran, on the day of his revelation. And then, the 3 holy days are the day of his arrival, the first day of Rizwan, the 9th day of Rizwan, the day the Holy Family rejoined him. Until then, they had been sending food from the Most Great House to the people in the Garden of Rizwan. They had been taking care of them. And the 12th day of Rizwan, the departure from the Garden of Rizwan. So, Shoghi Effendi calls the declaration of Baha'u'lláh in the Garden of Rizwan right here, that critical and seemingly unpropitious hour. He says, Baha'u'lláh chose in that critical and seemingly unpropitious hour to advance so challenging a claim, to lay bare the mystery surrounding his person, and to assume in their plenitude the power and the authority which the exclusive privileges of the one whose advent the Bab had prophesied. He chose to reveal right in that tiny, tiny little window of 9 days between his 10-year exile in Baghdad and his next exile in Constantinople, right there. That is like the most unlikely time of making such an important announcement. This is a graphic I did for the chronology. So I just wanted to illustrate how critical and seemingly unpropitious this time was. So this is the epilogue, the transformation of Baha'u'llah's enemies. We've seen the transformation of the Baha'is, but the transformation of the enemies is also something that I wanted to highlight, because they used words in their communications to Constantinople like misguided and detestable sect, secretly corrupting and misleading foolish persons and ignorant weaklings. And then the governor of Baghdad went to see Baha'u'lláh on the island when he asked him his favor about the horse. And he said that formerly your enemies insisted upon your departure. Now, however, they are even more insistent that you should remain. So it wasn't just the Babis that were transformed. It was also Baha'u'llah's enemies. And the first Baha'i community in the world was born in Baghdad. So that's something that we should always remember. They went from being hated to being beloved. They went from being disrespected to being respected. They went from being nobodies to being influential. I mean, it was a complete transformation. This is the last slide of my presentation. This is a gift to all the people of Iraq. It's called the Law-i Firayjat. So on the 9th of May, 1863, Baha'u'lláh left the garden. On the 3rd of May, 1863, when Baha'u'lláh left the Garden of Rizwan, he walked along the river and stopped in the gardens of Firayjat for 6 days, I think. And on the day that he left, he revealed a tablet called the Law-i Firayjat, which is a tablet that's very well known by Iraqi Baha'is and not at all known by anybody else. He says, he calls his departure the time when the accents of the dove of separation are raised from the land of Iraq, and he begs God to send down upon him every affliction intended for his loved ones in Iraq, so that nothing would ever dampen their devotion. He implores God to preserve thy loved ones in Iraq after I am gone, and to gather and sever them from all attachment, so that they may stand in fear of no one, to open their eyes, allowing them to ascend to the station of a true believer. He praises God continually in this tablet, and to ask them to return to God so that nothing could cause them any perturbation. These Arabs, and these are contemporary dress of Iraqis from various parts of Iraq, when he was leaving this homeland forever, Baha'u'lláh was remembering these Arabs that he lived with in the mountains of Kurdistan, in the capital city, a people that he had loved, taught, and helped for 10 years. He had kissed them. He had offered them tea. He had offered them rosewater sherbet. He had invited them into his homes. He had gone into tea shops and coffee shops with them for 3 hours a day for 6-7 years. And these Iraqis are the first Baha'is in history. They're the first unofficial recipients of his glory in Kurdistan, and then they're official recipients of his revelation in the Garden of Rizwan. And they streamed constantly through the Most Great House. They even came all the way to Firayjat to see him because they couldn't bear to be separated from him. And this tablet of Firayjat is a testament of love from Baha'u'lláh to an entire people. And I hope that I have done a good enough job in explaining the spiritual transformation of the Baha'is, of the Babis of Baghdad. And I hope I've done a good job in explaining to you why Baghdad is such a special place and why it's such a special time in Baha'u'llah's history. And I just hope that I was able to bring my point across in an efficient way. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions, I don't know how much time we have left.
You did an excellent job. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Yes, please. What a beautiful presentation. Well done.
Thank you.
Well, I got a question. I could see you have researched this subject thoroughly.
Yes.
So my question, have you come across this beautiful prayer by Baha'u'lláh, where it goes the beginning, create in me a pure heart, oh my God.
Yes.
I have read somewhere, or I heard from a talk, that when Baha'u'lláh came back from Kurdistan, from Suleimanieh, that was the first prayer revealed for the Babi community. Have you come across this?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is actually exactly what happened. Actually, I have a little bit of a detail for you. When Baha'u'lláh came home from Suleimanieh, he was dressed as a dervish. And I'm imagining over 2 years, his hair was probably matted, his beard was probably really long, he looked exactly like a dervish, and his family, they heard footsteps, and all of a sudden they saw this dervish. And Abdul Baha refused to let go of Baha'u'llah's hand. Refused in case he would leave again, you know what I mean? Like he was just holding on to his father's hand. And shortly thereafter, when Baha'u'lláh opened his bags, that prayer, create in me a pure heart, oh my God, and renew a tranquil conscience within me, oh my. That prayer was in his bag from Suleimanieh. So it's one of the few tablets we have left from Bahá'u'lláh that date to the 2 years that he was in Kurdistan. Create in me a pure heart was revealed during that time. And when Bahá'u'lláh saw this tablet and read it for the first time, he wept openly. And this is a memory that stayed with him for 60 years because he told this story when he was in Europe. So absolutely, that is a true story. And also, guys, I'm gonna let me just go in the chat here. I'm gonna just copy the link that I'm about to put in the chat. That is the PDF of my presentation and the notes that I kept looking at when I was looking off screen, all of my research. So that is available for you on my drive here. Let me just paste it. There you go. And it's also going to be available when they put the YouTube video. But if you click on that link, you get those 2 PDF documents. You'll get my slide notes, and you'll get the PowerPoint presentation that I gave. I do this so that people in their own communities are inspired to give these talks as well. I like to share everything that I have. Anybody else have any questions?
Yes, I've got my hand up, but I don't think anybody knows.
Oh, hi, darling. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to work.
Hello, sweetheart.
Hello.
I had 2 questions. So my first one was, there's obviously there's protests going on by women, for women at the moment in the cradle of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered, this link to Kurdistan, she's a Kurd, this lady that was died.
Yeah.
And I just wondered whether you felt that perhaps what's the spark that ignited this basically this women standing up and speaking truth to power, whether it was because that was the first peoples that recognized the revelation.
Well, I think. I think Iraqis are very special people, and I think that I think it's the Guardian or I don't know. Someone makes a correlation between all of the places where the manifestations of God suffered and were exiled, and all of the most active conflict zones in the world. So you have Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Israel and Palestine. So, but I don't have the reference for that. But I don't think the fact that she's a Kurd is, the Kurds have been because they border 3 countries. I think there's Iraqi Kurdistan, Persian Kurdistan, and maybe Turkish Kurdistan. I don't know. There's three different countries that the Kurdistan borders.
It's Iraq,
the link with Bahá'u'lláh
Iran, and Turkey.
Perfect.
And
Thanks.
Syria,
Iran and Turkey. And Syria as well. 4 countries.
Syria.
Yeah, I mean, they're an amazing people, and the fact that she's a Kurd does not surprise me. They are. Did you have a second question, Sandra?
Yes, and the second one was, it's very interesting that you said that this is the only time, because even though we read about it, I had never thought about the fact that he didn't do that again. And I was just wondering, he would have had opportunity in Constantinople and Adrianople. So
No,
what perhaps...
No, after Iraq, Baha'u'lláh would repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, I am a prisoner, I'm a prisoner, I'm a prisoner, I'm a prisoner. Even in 1877, after Abdul Baha put a banquet under the pines of Bahji, and he said, see, we can go, see? He's like, I'm a prisoner, I'm a prisoner. It took the mufti of the city kneeling for 4 hours to get Baha'u'lláh to leave.
Right.
After Baghdad, Baha'u'lláh never again felt free. Never again. And he refused to leave the walls of his house ever again. The Babis tried, the Baha'is tried so hard. They rented a garden for him in Adrianople. They rented a garden for him, and he was willing to go, but he would only stay in his house and pace in his garden, and he would only pace in his room in Akka, and he refused to leave Akka, and it's very heartbreaking. It's extremely heartbreaking. Baghdad, you get a sense that he was happy. No. It was because the exile to Baghdad was different from the exile to Constantinople, the exile to Adrianople, and the exile to Akka. The exile to Baghdad was necessary because they couldn't kill Baha'u'lláh, because Baha'u'lláh was the head of the Babis, and because the Babis had messed up. The Babis tried to kill the Shah. Obviously, they were nuts, and one of them was a candy maker, so they're obviously not super huge assassins. But he was the head, after the Bab, he was the head of the faith, of a faith who tried to assassinate the Shah. So he needed to be gone. He had the choice to go to Russia, but he chose to go to Iraq. He said, I want to go to Iraq. So he went to Iraq. That was a fair exile. Baha'u'lláh, after the attempted assassination on the Shah, could not stay in Persia. His exile to Iraq was not a problem. It's a problem that, Asiya Khanum was like 6 weeks pregnant and that she was on the back of a donkey. That was a problem. It was a problem that was in the middle of winter, and Abdu'l-Baha's feet and hands froze. That was a problem. But the exile itself was not a problem. He had to go, And before, Baha'u'lláh already willingly went to Iraq in 1851, 1852, when the Shah's prime minister, the Grand Vizier, told him, listen, things are getting hot. You need to disappear for a while. You can go to Iraq. And Baha'u'lláh went to Iraq, happily. And he taught the faith in Karbala, all the lost students of Tahrir, he gathered them back together and all this stuff. But the exile from Baghdad to Constantinople was mean-spirited, unfair, unjust. And the exile from Constantinople to Adrianople in the coldest winter in 40 years was unfair and unjust and unprovoked. Baha'u'lláh was nothing but obedient for the 4 months he was in Constantinople. And the exile from Adrianople to Akka was worse. So he was never in Baghdad. He could live the way he lived because he was not a prisoner. He was not a prisoner. He was a free man. But he was never again a free man, ever. He was imprisoned in Constantinople and in Adrianople and in Akka. So it's very different. The reason Baghdad is different is because the historical conditions of the exile were different.
There's
I don't know. I think. Does anybody disagree?
He was officially invited to Constantinople as a guest of the Sultan. So he even in Days of Remembrance explains, Days of Remembrance is a book that people can get, which is from all the attributions of Baha'u'lláh, a description of his own life. And in the context of his exile to Constantinople, again, we call it an exile to Adrianople. It was officially a command from the Sultan for Baha'u'lláh to be the guest of the Sultan, but it wasn't truly that.
But not really, because that's the way the wording was, but it happened because the Persians harassed the Shah and the Sultan with letters insulting the faith, saying that Baha'u'lláh was planning to assassinate them. He was too close to the holy shrines of Shia Islam. He was too close to Persia, that they bad-mouthed him so much. That is why he was exiled, because they did this campaign for years to get him kicked out. And the invitation language was couched as, you are now a guest of the Sultan. But then when he arrived and he was exiled a third time, he refused the exile. He said, I want to be martyred. I prefer to be martyred. Because you said I was your guest, and this is not how you treat a guest. So that wrinkle, you're right, comes in, but later, because Baha'u'lláh uses the language of that invitation to refuse the third exile. And then Mirza Yahya is just God, what his cowardice. He says, please, we don't want to be martyred. We have families, please accept the exile.
And to be clear, that was to Adrianople, which is modern day Edirne.
Mm-hmm.
So Constantinople, where he was invited to the seat of the Sultan's empire, is now known as Istanbul. And also Adrianople is now known as Edirne. There's a question from Eric Michaud. I'm sorry if I misspelled or pronounced your name wrong, but Eric, please.
Thank you very much, John Khan. Violeta, thank you so much for enlightening us, and it's always such a pleasure. I love your depth and the information you provide. So my question to you, if I may,
sure.
is basically the quote you specifically chosen, and yet is not the object of every revelation to affect transformation in all character of mankind. Do you know there's a huge context around this specific quote for this specific talk? So what do you know about? Why don't you tell us?
I don't.
How did you choose it?
When I write my chronologies, I work generally between 12 and 16 hours a day, and I'm in a state of constant inspiration. And when I'm in that state, I will often look up on my computer and see a quote or a picture or something that I need and that I use. And that's what happened with this quote. Is I was looking for a quote that I could use in my talk, and I was I was in one of those 12, 16-hour focused like workflow things, and all of a sudden I looked up on my screen and I saw that quote. I was like, oh, that works.
Can I share how much it works?
Yes.
All right.
So
friends, listen to that one. So you actually mentioned you just intuitively chosen, right? So listen to that. So what follows this specific quote you shared? So I'll be brief. Basically, for it, the charter of mankind, the character of mankind, be not changed. The futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent. Now wait for it. In the Avalim, an authoritative and well-known book, it is recorded, quote, a youth from Bani Hashem shall be made manifest, who will reveal a new book and promulgate a new law. Now, what it means really here in that context is a new book, as per the beloved Guardian, talks about, identifies this as the Persian Bayan, and stating that it fulfills the Mohammedan prophecy that the youth from Bani Hashem will reveal a new book and promulgate a new law. Now, wait for it. Bani Hashem is basically a clan, a tribe, from which Muhammad appeared, and the Bab was a descendant.
Oh, okay.
And now you chose that specific quote, talking about His Holiness Bahá'u'lláh, re-infusing spiritual life onto the Babi communities who are raised my case. Thank you so very much. There we go.
That's great. Thank you for the context. I'm going to look that up. That's great.
Please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they call the descendants of Muhammad Hashemites as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I've heard that term before. That's wonderful. Does anybody else have anything to add?
I have a question, all right?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and that's wonderful PowerPoint presentation. My inquiry about all the details about the photo of the Bahá'u'lláh house in Baghdad, from where we can get the aerial photo. I haven't seen it before.
Oh, the aerial photo. No. The aerial photo is the aerial photo is from the Library of Congress, and you can find it on my website. You can find it on my website. Let me just Blessed Beauty, current time in Baghdad. Okay, let me just show you. It's an aerial photo of the general neighborhood in which he lived.
Yes. We are familiar with it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then let me just show you where you can get that picture. Okay. So do you have another question, or was that your question?
I mean, can we go to the, as we mentioned, that it is taken from the Congress Library USA.
Yeah,
Can
definitely.
we go through this? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
the
But you
computer?
don't have to. You don't have to look really hard because it's. I mean, I can. Can I upload something to the?
Violetta, if you could, you have some close-ups, area close-ups that you have in your collection that maybe you could put on your website. I mean,
Everything I have, I already put on the.
They're still aerial, but they're a bit more clear.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you have pictures that you can give me that are better than this one?
You had them when we were talking a few months ago.
Oh, okay.
I could look for them again.
Violetta, if you just drop the website where I can find them, then I can actually
Yeah.
in the chat.
It's not working for me. I'm just gonna put it in the chat. It's here. This is if you do a search, I think it's Kark neighborhood. Kark is the other word for Old Baghdad. And if you go to the Library of Congress, you can find some as well. Let me just
write old photo of Baghdad.
Let me just try something here for you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just see what I can do. Of Congress and
the end, the extra end.
It's all right. It'll figure it out. It always does. I never correct my spelling. So now you do this. You can see these are aerial photos, sort of the general neighborhood. Car.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, but if you see my my website, you'll find it and you'll be able to click on it and get a higher resolution.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, or you can give me your email and I can email it to you.
Please, I will send my email. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? How much time do we have left?
Minor detail.
9 minutes till our hard stop.
5? How many minutes?
We have 8 minutes until our hard stop.
Okay, great. I'm so glad I was able to get to the end. I was worried.
Minor detail about the geography. So there are 2 gardens of Ridwan. One is the original in Baghdad, and one is the one in Akka, or between Haifa and Akka. So the one in Baghdad is really not an island. It's the eastern banks of the river Tigris.
That's right. That's right. You're right. It's a garden in Akka that's an island.
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
May I ask, sorry, another question, if that's okay?
Sure. Sure, we have 8 minutes, guys. Ask as many questions as you like.
I need you to hold on. Lisa's been patiently waiting to ask her question.
Okay, go ahead.
Lisa, can you unmute yourself?
Lisa, I want to hear your question.
Okay, well, I thought John might want to just read it out loud, because this may be something for a whole other day. But
okay.
The question is do we know what might be the future of modern day Iraq based on this relationship with the twin manifestations? Why the current great challenges there now? Not a 3-minute answer, probably. So maybe if you want to think it over and come back another time, I'd certainly understand. But if anyone, if you have some, so that's really it. If there's been this great revelation over it, and so why all the suffering now? Why? That's it. Maybe you can unpack it just a little bit.
Because the general population of that whole region has refused 2 manifestations of God, and they are still refusing them.
Yeah.
It's a spiritualization process because people has walked away from God and the spiritual realm. So it's kind of a rehabilitation for humankind.
Can I have a question? Do the question and answers make it onto the website? do they stay on YouTube, question and answers?
Yes.
They tend to, yes.
So I can shortly, just so we can get to the next question Sandra has, I can shortly say that Baha'u'lláh promises great things for that region of the world, particularly Iran is going to be the light of the world eventually. But for the immediate future, things are going to be very dark. So we can move on to the next question from Sandra.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you. Violetta, I did not know that Baha'u'lláh owned a bakery. And
it's two lines in Baha'u'lláh King of Glory, page 105. 2 lines, and I've been talking about this for 6 months because I think it's the best thing in the entire world, and it made me so happy to read that. And I even have like a picture of kids selling bread, like, and it's literally 2 lines in King of Glory, page 105.
Wonderful. And is there any more detail? Do we know how?
If there was, I would have told you.
Oh,
if there was, I would have told you.
Thank you so much, though. That was
you can rest assured that if I ever find out anything more about not only the bakery but the memoirs of Sheikh Sultan, who walked alone with Baha'u'lláh 300 kilometers back to Baghdad, you guys will be the first to know. I'm going to make a Zoom about it, that's for sure. But literally, I've told you everything I know about the bakery. I generally do. I generally say everything I know.
Story, Violetta, I sent my email in the chat.
Okay, all right. Let me just save that. Let me just save
that. Abbas.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Are you Arab as well?
Yes, Iraqi, yeah, Iraq.
Oh, that's amazing! Wow!
That's my brother Rafi.
Did I do a good job? Did I do a good job talking about your people?
Yeah. My brother Rafi and my second cousin Abir.
Really? That's amazing. Well, I am a little bit Arab. My grandmother's father was born in Palestine, and he married the daughter of the first Egyptian Baha'i. So I have a little bit of Arab blood. Oh, and my grandfather was Persian. He was born in Egypt, but he was culturally Egyptian. You know, like he was like his blood was Persian, but he was like an Egyptian man because he was born in Egypt, and so
that's lovely, unity and diversity.
I know, we need more Arab Baha'is. So much fun.
Thoraya Stone is also Iraqi from Baghdad.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. Oh, yeah, so please download everything. That's so great. Oh, I love Baghdad, my God. Oh, this part of Baha'u'llah's life is, I can just feel him. That's when he's really himself, you know? He lets this 80-year-old woman kiss him. He buys a flour mill. He goes in camps for days on end at the Mazra' Vashash. You know, like he's free. He's like, you know, he's talking to everybody. He's like, he's settling in inheritances. Like, and he's like, you know, he's really a man. He's in his 40s. He has like, all his kids are like 10, 12, 16, 19. You know, like, you know, he's been married for 20 years by this point. Like, it's just like, it's like he's not just manifestation of God for me in Baghdad. He's a happy man. You know, like even if he's being like, but there's opposition, he was very happy in Baghdad. He was happier in Baghdad than he was in Persia, I think. I mean, frankly.
Sorry, to simple thing, tiny. My father went to Baghdad and worked there and loved it too. None of it makes me different. He was not Iraqi. I just wanted to belong.
That's great. I just would love to go there. I would just love to go there. Just because, you know, like one day these mobs, they were coming down to kill him, you know. And Baha'u'lláh swung open the door of the most great house and said, welcome, welcome. And the mob came into the Most Great House, and Asiya Khanum had tea ready, and they had rose water sherbet, and they just ate, and then when they left, this mob that wanted to kill Baha'u'lláh, when they left the Most Great House, they went into the streets screaming, "Death to the enemies of Baha'u'lláh! Death to the enemies of Baha'u'lláh!" It's just so cute. These kinds of stories, they never happen in Akka. It's different, man. It's different. Baghdad's amazing. Baghdad's so great. I'm so happy to see you all. Yes?
There's 1 minute left for us. So we're going to be closing up. And
okay. Sounds good.
We appreciate all the time that we were able to spend with you today, Violetta. You've really expounded so much more than a lot of people chose to. And
all right. Well, if we only have 1 minute, can I wrap up and tell and explain what this talk was and what the next talk is and the one after?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is one in a series. This is one in a series of 6 talks. The first one is online already. It's called How Baha'i History Can Create Vibrant Communities. And it's basically based on the writings of The Guardian. And it's the thesis for the rest of these stories, because I believe that learning about history like this can create vibrant communities locally. I believe that finding out about Baha'u'llah's bakery can affect you and can affect your community, because it's a real thing. And because it's the history of manifestation of God, it's not just book history, it's real. It's not in the past, it's in the present, because Baha'u'lláh is still around. So when we talk about him, he's here. So that's why I did this series of 6 talks at the school in Portugal. And the next one is what we can learn from 2 episodes of Crisis and Victory in the life of Baha'u'lláh. And it's a series. It's an external crisis coming from non-Baha'is, and an internal victory that has to do just with Baha'is. It's a declaration of Rizwan. And then the internal crises is the covenant breaking of Mirza Yahya. And after that, the victory of this internal crisis that's within the faith, after the Most Great Separation, is the proclamation of Baha'u'lláh. So the enemies of the faith, this talk is like inner crisis, external victory, external crisis, internal victory. You learn so much about the dynamics about crisis and victory. And then the talk after that is everything people don't know about 5 women in the lives of the Bab and Baha'u'lláh. And then the talk about that, after that, is the roots of community life and social action in the life of Abdul Baha. So where the first local assembly, the first prayer gatherings, the first shrine, the first house of worship, the first social action, the first humanitarian aid, all directly related to his biography. And then the last one is like a cute little one. It's called Remarkable Stories from Baha'i History. Really rare stories that just completely... Just when I read them, my jaw dropped. That was the qualification for getting into that talk. And so it's 1 a month until January. And then after that, if you're in between there, there's also, I've illustrated the entire letter of the 30th of December. All 9,000 words. I made 700 slides, and it's all a work of art for communities to work on locally, to make local plans. So if Clearwater would like to hear about that, I can totally present that.
It's very, very appreciated, and the answer is always yes.
Okay, great. Awesome.
We appreciate all of your contributions you've made thus far, and we're very happy to, again, share the resources you're producing.
This is my service for the 9-year plan. So if you want me to speak to your local communities, you have my email, get in touch with me. I'm happy to give these talks as often as I need to. Speaking about Baha'u'lláh is only an honor and a joy. So I'm happy to repeat the talk.
And this is to everyone around the world that is here. Of course, members of our community here, thank you so much, Violetta, as you've been able to visit with us and share this, just one piece of a series of pieces that's coming together. And we really appreciate it because, again, everyone that's joining here that is hopefully inspired has an opportunity to share this with others. And that's what we now, to finalize, to wrap everything up, we ask all of you to do. We ask you to look at the resources that Violetta Zane has shared with us. And we were talking about doing your research outside of this talk today. Do your research, go look at these actual resources, primary sources, secondary sources, look at them, learn from them, and share them. And this is how we are all inspired to follow in these amazing footsteps that Violetta is, again, shining a light on once more.
Okay, let me just, one last time before we finish, I'll just copy that and then my email at the last minute, so that way if anybody wants
yeah, please take the links, yes. Oh, you have below, everybody, I'm going to read it out loud, as computers can't really write the, well, they can, but nonetheless, I'll read it anyway. All right, so it's violettaz@gmail.com. I'll spell it VIOLETTA, Z as in Z, at gmail.com. So again, it's V as in Victor, I-O, L as in Lamb, E-T, T as in Thomas, A as in Alpha, Z as in Z, zebra, at gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. We appreciate it on this Sunday. We look forward, Violetta, to our next session again together. And please, as you shared it before, that beautiful banner, share it again. And everybody who sees the banner, share it around so everyone can join this beautiful series again once more.
Great. Okay,
Thank
bye.
you, Clearwater. Thank you, Clearwater, for hosting.
Yes, thank you, Clearwater.